Hello and welcome to this session in which we will discuss how COSO, the Committee of Sponsoring Organization of the Treadway Commission, addresses the governance of cloud computing services. What will be a good prerequisite for this session? Understanding what COSO is, because COSO has established framework for internal control, enterprise risk management, and fraud deterrence. So at this point, the assumption is this: you know what cloud computing is. If not, you want to go and look at the cloud computing lectures. You know what internal control, the components of internal control. You know ERM, enterprise risk management. And obviously, you need to know what a fraud deterrence. So in this session, what we are doing, we are taking the COSO framework, connect the COSO framework as a foundational structure for managing the governance and control environment to cloud computing. Simply put, we're going to take the internal control, ERM, and fraud and apply them to cloud services or cloud computing governance. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, FarhatLectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today. Let's first talk about the internal control. We have the integrated framework. And what we're going to do, we're going to take the traditional internal control integrated framework and we're going to leverage its structure to do what? To help us govern cloud computing services. Let's review real quick. The internal control is composed of 5 parts: control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring activities. In this session, we're going to look at each of these sections separately and how does it relate to cloud computing? How can it be applied? Now, I hope that you remember each part of these. What is control environment? What is risk assessment? So on and so forth. Starting with the control environment, it establishes a set of standards, processes, and structure that carrying out internal control across all the organization. Remember, when we talk about the internal control, we said the control environment is an umbrella for all the organization. In other words, the board of directors is part of the control environment. The board of directors influences every single aspect of the company because those are the people at the top management, board of director, senior managers. That's part of the control environment. In the context of cloud computing, this is what we need to know. Here what we're looking at is we have to mandate the formation of cloud governance policy. So we have to have overall policies of how we run our cloud services, the procedures for cloud computing, and the structure to control the cloud environment effectively. So we have to have a policies as part of the control environment. So we have to establish cloud governance committee, and this committee, other than the audit committee, other than the IT committee, it should be cloud governance committee. Why? Because when we specifically address the cloud, we are giving it its importance. It should be consistent of IT people, legal people, compliance people, and business representative. Because cloud is involved with all of those, whether it's technical IT, legal, compliance, those go together, and business people who run the company on a day-to-day basis to oversee the implementation and management of cloud services. You want to get the feedback from all these different sources. Also, this committee should develop and enforce policies and procedure for the use of cloud services, ensuring that the cloud services policies are aligned with the organizational objective and in compliance with applicable laws and regulation. So that's the first component. Let's move to risk assessment. This is a crucial step in any controlled environment. Here we have to evaluate the risk associated with cloud computing. If I ask you, can you identify the risk associated with cloud computing? And I hope you do. What are the risks? One is data breach. It's in the cloud. Someone may get to it. Or we might lose it because we don't have it. It's somewhere else. And the third
One is service interruption. We want to make sure it's available to us. Those are the really three risks. There are other risks, but those are the three main ones. This component, risk assessment helps organization assesses and prioritize, like how likely this to happen, and let's have a plan. Is this important for us? How important and how likely to happen? And let's have some controls. Before adopting a cloud service, the organization conduct a comprehensive risk assessment. How bad is it if we lost the data or if we have a service interruption? To identify potential risks, what are the risks that we're going to be facing for each one of them, and how much are we willing to accept that risk? Then we have to prioritize the risks based on the likelihood and impact. How likely is it to happen? And if it happens, how large is the loss, the impact? Both the likelihood, what's the percentage happening? It could be very small. This could be like 0.01%. But the impact is huge. Or we could have the probability of that happening 50%, but the impact is minimal. So we have to know the likelihood and the impact. Then we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to accept this risk? How are we going to mitigate this risk? Are we going to transfer it, accept it, or avoid that risk overall? As part of the control activities, these are action steps help mitigate identified risks. So after you identify the risk and the control assessment, you want to have some control activities that you can take. For cloud computing services or for cloud computing, these could be implementing security measures like encryption, multi-factor authentication, therefore we don't have a data breach, regular audit, regular backup. For example, to mitigate against unauthorized access to cloud services, we might implement multi-factor authentication. Hopefully we know what this is. We mentioned it several times, where you don't really need a password. You need a password plus something else in order to access the information. For example, a text message to your phone, or some secret number that comes to your email, or to your token that you're holding in your hand. We have to implement strict access control. This way we ensure only people who are supposed to be there, authorized, can access important sensitive data, because we have different type of data. Sensitive data is important. Regular audit and reviews of access logs, who logged in, are conducted to monitor any suspicious activity. The fourth component of the internal control is information and communication. This ensures that relevant and reliable information is distributed, disseminated properly within the organization. In the context of cloud computing, this could mean proper communication about our policies, any changes, any incidents relevant to the stakeholders, reporting all these incidents. An example will be the organization develops clear and concise communication channel and procedures to ensure that all stakeholders, suppliers, customers, employees, management, shareholders are aware of the policies, procedure, and changes related to cloud services as needed. For example, an update or an incident related to cloud computing services are communicated on a timely basis to relevant department via email, dashboards, or whatever means of communication we will utilize. Monitoring activities is the fifth component of internal control. We have to, on a regular basis, evaluate to make sure whether controls are working as intended. And this is one of the most important ones, because you could have 1, 2, 3, and 4, but if you don't monitor with 5, then those controls might fail and you may not be aware of it. For cloud computing services, continuous monitoring of security and compliance is critical. For example, we might deploy automated monitoring tools to continuously monitor the security and performance of the cloud service, make sure if someone is attacking us, if there's anyone that's not supposed to be there, a lot of traffic at all times. This way we can monitor what's going on and be on the alert. These tools alert the IT team in real time to any security breaches or performance issues, allowing for immediate response and remediation, and this is exactly what we need. So we talked about the internal control, the 5 components of the internal control. Now we're going to move into ERM, the Enterprise Risk Management Framework. This framework emphasizes a risk-based approach. Now bear in mind, this is also a prerequisite for this session, because I have 5 different recordings, and each recording goes from 15 to 20 minutes about ERM. So I am not going to be explaining ERM here. I'm just going to touch upon how does ERM affect cloud computing services. Just want to let you know this. So in case you're saying, he's not covering ERM in depth, because in depth, that's not the place. But the ERM emphasizes a risk-based approach. When applied to cloud computing, it helps align the strategy of the company, the performance and risk management with the cloud computing governance policy. It aligns the two. We have several components of the enterprise risk management. I'll go over each one of them very briefly here and how does it relate to cloud computing, governance, and culture. For example, this is a 20-minute recording to explaining governance and culture. This component focuses on organizational governance and culture, which directly impact cloud computing governance by defining roles, responsibilities, and establishing a risk-aware culture. Simply put, as part of our corporate culture, our governance, we have to have people specifically responsible with proper roles so we can hold them responsible for our cloud computing services. Strategy and objective setting. In the context of cloud computing, this involves setting clear objectives and strategies for the use of cloud services. Why did we buy it? For what purpose? Is it cost saving? Is it for efficiency? Is it making us more competitive? And all of these, they have to be in line with the organization, risk tolerance, and appetite. Performance. Measures and monitor the performance of cloud computing services against set objective. Because remember, you set some objective, now you want to monitor. And risk assessment expectation. Here we're talking about KPIs and KRIs. I will go a little bit more over KPIs and KRIs on the next few slides because I believe it's important to give you a good picture, a good taste of what we are talking about in ERM. Obviously, we always have to review and revise, just like in monitoring and their internal control. This involves regular review and revision of cloud computing governance policy because technology changes, people changes, our need change, our business change, our suppliers change, our competition change, our industry changes. Therefore, on a regular basis, what do you have to do? Review and revise your policies to ensure their effectiveness, and most importantly, they are still relevant to what we are doing. ERM application. Through ERM, we should establish, as we said, key risk indicators and key performance indicators, those two, through the ERM framework. This is to ensure and monitor the performance and risk of cloud services. And here we have to define clearly what KPIs and what KRIs are we dealing with. And we're going to have a few examples just to kind of give you a taste of it. So organization can effectively measure, monitor, and manage their cloud computing and associated risk. We have to establish threshold and objectives like percentages for each indicators, provide the basis for action so we can correct if there's anything wrong, and informed business decision. Best to take a look at few examples. Let's look at few KPIs. One of the KPIs that we can use is for cloud computing is service availability. How can we measure this? Well, percentage of uptime of cloud services. What percentage we should be looking for? Close to 100%, 99.99. The objective is to ensure the cloud service is available. So what do? We monitor this performance, key performance indicator, KPI for cloud services. Another KPI for cloud computing will be something like response time. The average response time of cloud service. So when we ask for a file, when we want to access a software to use, when we want to access our network, how long should it take? Well, to ensure the cloud service response within an acceptable time frame, for example, we can set 300 milliseconds. We'll get this information. Another key performance indicator could be resource utilization, the percentage of CPU, memory, and storage utilization. Well, here the objective is to manage resource consumptions efficiently and avoid over provisioning. For example, keeping CPU at 70%. Don't put a lot of pressure on it. That's not good. There are other KPIs, but I believe those are common sense. In a sense, they allow you understand what we mean by KPIs in the context of ERM and in the context of dealing with cloud computing services specifically. Now, we could have KPIs and KRIs for other things as well. Key risk indicators, KRIs. We could look at security incidents, number of security incidents detected per month. How many times they try to have a data breach. To monitor the security within a threshold of 0 incidents. We don't want to have any. Data breaches, number of unauthorized access. How many people were able to get in? Not allowed to do so. Well, to identify and prevent any unauthorized access to confidential information, and the goal here is to have 0 breaches, no breaches, because one breach could be a serious one. Compliance violation, same thing, number of compliance violation identified in audit, because this is how we get caught with this. Ensure adherence to regulatory and organizational policies, maintaining compliance close to zero. Zip, no violation. This is the objective. This is the objective. But if we don't identify the objective, we don't know how to deal with it. Then we don't know what steps to take. Now, the third component of the COSO is the fraud deterrence. In the context of cloud computing, what would this include? It will include implementing controls and policies to do what? To detect and prevent fraudulent activities related to cloud services, like specifically unauthorized access and data theft. So if you notice, we don't only rely on internal control or ERM. We rely on internal control, ERM, fraud deterrence. Those are multiple layers of defense, and this is how you run a company, with redundancies to secure yourself. Fraud deterrence involves a set of proactive steps and measures taken to prevent fraud before it occurs within an organization system. So if you want zero breach, if you want no one accessing your data, well, you have to have fraud deterrent policies. What could be some examples of this? Detecting anomalies. What does that mean? The company implement a machine learning based anomaly detection system in its cloud computing services. What do? We study and monitor users' behavior. For example, no one should be accessing the data at 3 a.m. based on our user behavior. Well, if we suddenly see a spike at 3 a.m., well, there's an issue. Okay? In system interaction, flagging any abnormal behavior or transaction, for example, a large transaction or transaction in a geographical area where we should not have any clients, suppliers, or employees. This is what we mean by anomaly detection system. Detection fraudulent activities in real time. And this banks do it all the time. I oftentimes get calls from my bank saying, well, did you make this purchase? It's unusual. For example, I'll give you a real example. My brother, my name on his account. So we are a joint owner because he travels overseas. So he needs me here to, for example, resolve if he have any banking issues. Sometimes he could be in a remote country and he buys something. Before they approve it, the banks call me. It's like, is this approval? Usually what I have to do is say, wait, I'll have to call my brother, say, are you buying this item? He would say yes. He would say yes. And they will approve the purchase. It's real-time monitoring, allowing immediate action to prevent any potential damage or loss. Here, the bank is utilizing what? Fraud detection techniques. Access control and monitoring. Strict access control are enforced. No one can go in, ensuring that only authorized people have access to sensitive data. Notice they repeat themselves, but you have to see the whole picture. It's a 3 layers of defense: internal control, ERM, fraud detection policies. Every access and modification are logged in details for review. The objective here, obviously, prevent unauthorized people from making any modification and having a clear trail of interaction, clear trail of audit, so we know who got in, if we need to go back and investigate and hold someone accountable. Multi-factor authentication. Well, the company enforces MFA for all users accessing the cloud services, requiring at least 2 forms of identification: a password and your fingerprint. A password, and you get a text message on your phone before giving you access. The objective is to add extra layer of security to protect against unauthorized access. Even if you lost your password or your password fell into the wrong hands, they still can't have your cell phone, for example. Let's take a look at this multiple choice questions from Farhat lectures. Which specific KPI should healthcare provider monitor to ensure compliance with applicable regulation? So we have a healthcare provider is ensuring adherence to regulatory and organizational policies in its cloud environment. Which KPI will be the best here to ensure compliance with applicable regulation? In your opinion, what do you think healthcare is concerned about? Which KPI basically? Is it service availability? Well, it's good to have service availability, but that applies to all, right? You want to have your information, your software, your network available at all time. Yes, but that's a concern for all companies, and this is not to ensure adherence to regulatory and organization policies, specifically regulatory. That's your problem. If the service is not available almost immediately, that's a company problem. the healthcare department or the federal government don't care about this. Therefore, A is not the answer. Resource utilization. Well, what's resource utilization? How effectively resources are being used, your CPU. Well, regulators don't care about this. That's your problem as well. Cost management. Are regulator involved in your cost management? No. You want to pay more or less? That's your problem. How about compliance violation? Well, compliance violation measures the adherence to what? To applicable laws and regulations, especially if you are in the healthcare industries. You're under privacy rules. And your concern is you could have compliance violation. That's your KPI. And would you want to keep this at what level? At a level of 0, none. You don't want to have any compliance violation. What should you do now? Go to Farhat lectures as a CPA, as a future CPA, invest in yourself. I know it's a lot of material. It's worth it though. This is a 20, 30, 40-year investment in your life. Take it seriously. It will change your life. Good luck. Study hard and learn for the sake of learning. Stay safe.